Hello again, everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's lesson. Today's lesson is going to go exactly how yesterday's did. We're just going to get a little bit more into the body paragraphs today. We're going to be focusing on evidence sentences as well as analysis sentences. So hopefully all of your questions about those two things are cleared up by the end of this slideshow. The three things that you're going to want to have out in front of you are the slides in this video, your essay template, which can be found on Google Classroom. You should have already done your main claim. You should have done your subclaim for body paragraph 1, and you should have done your subclaim for body paragraph 2. If you haven't done those things yet, try to get those done as soon as possible so that you can get this essay really going. You might also want in front of you your articles. Either the online copy or the hard copy is fine, but you are going to need to be looking for evidence again today if for whatever reason you decide not to use the evidence that you already have. So it'll be a good idea to have these good examples of evidence out for you. Alrighty, so we are going to go ahead and jump right into evidence sentences. If you want to take notes, feel free. If you don't, that's also fine. The slides and the video are going to be available for you. Remember, these are evidence sentences. You will see the adorable picture of the dog in the corner. Bonus points if you guys understand that reference and get who those two dogs are. I'll tell you at the end of the video in case the suspense is killing you. But let's go ahead and start. So, your evidence sentence needs 4 parts. You need a transition, you need a contextual lead-in, the quote itself, and a citation at the very end of the sentence. Your lead-in is going to be a little different than it is in English. It's the who and the what, and again, I'm not going to go super into depth on this because we've already provided you guys with a video on evidence sentences and analysis, so I'm just tailoring it to this actual essay. If there's stuff about evidence sentences and analysis sentences that you don't understand, go ahead and take a look at that evidence sentence and analysis sentence practice that we pushed out a few weeks ago. So again, lead-ins the who and the what. You're going to always put the actual quote in quotation marks, logical enough. And the citation is the author's last name. If an author's last name is not provided to you, it's going to be the article title. For the most part, all of our articles that we've given you have authors' names, so you really should be able to find the author's last name on all of our articles. Make sure your quotes are also only one sentence. We don't want a paragraph of text as your quote. If a sentence is really, really long but you like it, pick out the best parts and put the 3 dots in the middle. So, once you have found evidence, we're going to talk about how you turn that evidence into an actual good evidence sentence. Our 4 things are up here just as a reference. So let's say that this was our quote. Yesterday we focused on amnesty for the main claims and subclaims, so we're going to focus on deportation today, just to be fair to every side. So the quote is, undocumented workers cost Arizona taxpayers more than $1 billion a year for education, medical care, and incarceration after subtracting the estimated taxes they pay. So we see this quote. Not good enough for the actual essay. We need you to turn that quote into an evidence sentence. You're going to do that by adding each of these components in, right? 3's already taken care of for you. You already have the quote in front of you. But to turn it into an evidence sentence, we first need to start with a transition. Transitions are anything like, for example, for instance, furthermore, in addition, next, finally, first. Any of those types of words, if you're struggling for a good transition and you want to vary them throughout your essay, which is always a good idea, you can always look online for transition words. Tons of lists will come up. So there's our transition, right? We see a study conducted in Washington by the Federation for American Immigration Reform shows the economic burden illegal immigrants have due to the fact that undocumented workers cost Arizona taxpayers more than $1 billion a year for education, medical care, and incarceration after subtracting the estimated taxes they pay. End quote, and then Davis in parentheses with a period at the end. So I already showed you where the transition is. I need you to find the contextual lead-in, the quote, and the citation. So go ahead and pause the video for a second, see if you can identify those things, and then we'll go over it together. So pause your video and find those. Okay, here are all of our parts. The transition was easy enough. It's just for instance. Remember, the transition's really going to help your evidence flow, so we know where your evidence is. We can distinctively find it. It's super easy for us as graders to do that. Make sure you are adding transitions to your evidence sentences. Second, the contextual lead-in kind of gives us a grounding. What are we talking about? What are you going to be presenting to us? As the audience, it helps us to clarify some things. We just need the who and the what. So the who we have right here, right? It's by the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And our what, we know it's a study, right? That's sort of the what. We know that it's conducted in Washington. We also know that this quote's going to be about economic burden of illegal immigrants, right? So this is going to be a really good example that has a who, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and the what, right? It tells us that it's a study. It tells us where it's at. It tells us this is going to be a quote about economic burden that illegal immigrants have, okay? And then we have our actual quote right here. This was the quote from before. You literally just copy and paste it. Finally, we have the author's last name. This came from Article 1. His last name is Davis. We always put it in parentheses, and we always, always, always put the punctuation after. So we are never going to put a period inside the quotes. We are always going to save it for right at the end of our citation. If we pay attention to this right here, this part of the sentence is neither of those or any of these four components, right? But without it, the sentence doesn't make sense as a sentence, right? So if we said, for instance, a study conducted in Washington by the Federation for American Immigration Reform shows the economic burden illegal immigrants have. Undocumented workers cost Arizona taxpayers more than $1 billion a year, right? Doesn't make sense as a grammatically correct English sentence. We sometimes need to add words in between the quote and the contextual lead-in to make sure that it makes sense. A good way to do this is to read it out loud. Make sure the whole thing flows, okay? Some general tips for evidence sentences. Make sure the evidence actually backs up your main claim. If in your main claim you say amnesty is the best, but then you have a bunch of evidence sentences talking about how good deportation would be for America, not going to be great. Also, your evidence needs to back up your subclaims. So if your subclaim says economics are important and amnesty helps economics, but then you tell us a bunch of reasons about how amnesty helps people go to school and get educations and families to stay together, that's humanitarian, right? That's not economic. So you need to make sure that your evidence is really backing up whatever you're saying in your main claim as well as your subclaims. You also need to make sure it makes sense as a sentence. We already kind of went over that in the last slide. Read it out loud to check. Read it out loud to yourself. Read it out loud to your guardians, to brothers, to sisters, to whoever you're at home quarantined with. Call a friend. Make sure it makes sense as a sentence. Also, try to find evidence that is not repetitive. In the last quote, it was about American taxpayers having to pay money for illegal immigrants being in America. If I had two quotes that basically said the same thing, it's not going to be the best argument, right? I'm going to want to find two different economic reasons why deportation is the best. I'm trying to find as many reasons as I can to support my side to make my argument really strong. So don't give two pieces of evidence about taxes, right? Give one about taxes, because that's a great reason, but then maybe find another about jobs, or find another about welfare, or find another about some other aspect of the economic argument. To do that, definitely go through your highlighting in the articles to find good evidence. Each of those articles should have different reasons, right? They're not all just about taxes if the article's about economics. So find those other reasons and bring them in. Also, if you're comfortable with evidence sentences, I would definitely suggest that you try to change up the structure if at all possible, so that every single quote that you have doesn't say, for instance, a study about economic burden said this, right? Because that can get a little bit cookie cutter, a little bit boring. At the same time, if you are not super comfortable with putting together an evidence sentence, use this kind of format, right? You will not lose a ton of points because every single thing sounds the same. It's better to do it correctly than to do it incorrectly, right? But again, for the honors students or for those who feel pretty comfortable, try to change it up. Your teachers are also always available to help you out, so you can always send an email. You can always have them check on the Google Doc to see how it looks, right? Another sample's right here for you guys for an amnesty kind of ES if you wanted to look at that. So now we are going to transition into analysis. If you guys will notice, this dog is looking out. He's thinking about a bunch of things, pondering, right? That's what your analysis should be. Your analysis should be all about that extra critical thinking that goes along with those evidence sentences. So analysis is always 2 sentences after each evidence sentence. Sentence 1 is going to explain the meaning of the quote or elaborate on the facts that the quote presents. It should not restate word for word what the quote said, but it should put it into your own words, kind of give some background, give some more detail to the audience. Sentence 2 is always going to link back to the prompt itself and prove that your main claim is correct. So this is where you're really saying, this quote proves I'm right. This quote proves deportation or amnesty is the best because blah, 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 right? Here's a sample if you guys wanted to look at that one. A good question to ask yourself when you're writing your sentence 2 for analysis: why would amnesty or deportation, whichever you're arguing for, help the economy, safety, security, political, humanitarian reasons for America, right? How does the quote prove that you are correct, that amnesty or deportation is the best and that it's helping? Something to avoid. Don't say how the opposite side would hurt. Focus on how your side helps. So we're going to get into that a little bit more looking at this next example. So here is a little reminder for what we should be doing in our analysis sentence 1 and analysis sentence 2. So this is our ES, the one we already used, right? Talking about the Washington study, saying that undocumented workers cost Arizona taxpayers more than $1 billion a year in all these different aspects. So your first analysis should be explaining the meaning, giving more details, giving some background, right? So your first analysis could say, much of the money that legal American citizens make throughout the year is benefiting non-American citizens rather than being used to better the country, right? Kind of sheds some more light, kind of puts it into our own words, summarizes what the quote itself was saying. Our analysis sentence number 2 needs to link back to the prompt, needs to prove my main claim is right. So we would say something like, if I had talked about deportation, right, because this is what this evidence is supporting, it's supporting deportation, I could say, deporting illegal immigrants would fix this problem and help the economy, since taxpayer dollars could be used to help American citizens through public work projects like schools, hospitals, and transportation funding, right? The money that we are wasting on illegal immigrants could go to better suited things. That is what this analysis is arguing. So again, we have this keyword, would fix, right? We are not saying amnesty would hurt because all of this money goes towards illegal immigrants and not towards American citizens. This is not as strong of an argument. You are showing how your side is best, not how the other side is worst, okay? If you're in honors, you're going to do a counterclaim where you get a chance to talk about how the other side is bad, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So general tips for your analysis. Try not to repeat exactly what the quote just said for AS1. Do any of these things down here. If you're stuck, look back at this slide. But again, don't try to repeat it word for word. For AS2, make sure you're explaining how your side helps, not how the other side hurts. Why your side is best, not why the other side is the worst. Try not to be too repetitive. So try not to make your AS1 be really repetitive, your AS2 be really repetitive, bring up different facts. As long as you're finding different evidence that supports your side and you're not bringing up evidence that says basically the same thing, your analysis should generally be fine. Also, because the analysis is a little bit more of your opinion based, try not to bring up any stereotypes or any kind of outlandish comments or personal opinions that can't be supported by facts or statistics, right? We're still trying to be logical. We're still trying to make sure that everything we're saying is academic and can be supported by what the articles were saying. We're not trying to go off on a branch of craziness and outlandishness and just say whatever we think about types of people or jobs or America or anything like that, right? Stay grounded in the evidence. So your tasks for today are going to be to have the template open on Google Classroom. You are going to turn the evidence that you found yesterday. If you didn't find evidence yesterday, find it today. You need at least 4 pieces. You are going to turn that evidence into evidence sentences, and then you're going to type them into your template. You have 2 per body paragraph, so you should have 4 ESs total by the end of today. You are also going to write 2 sentences of analysis following each evidence sentence in the template. Remember, you have 2 after each ES, meaning you have 4 per body paragraph, meaning that you have